She left home on a warm August morning with a simple plan: meet her friends, go swimming, and be back later that day. No packed bags, no warning signs, no goodbye note, just a short walk across town. But somewhere between her front door and the swimming cove, she vanished, and for more than 5 decades, no one has been able to explain how. Today, you're about to hear one of the most overlooked missing persons cases from 1971, a disappearance so quiet, so clean, it left behind almost no trace and far too many questions. If you enjoy real unsolved cases, deep dive timelines, and mystery investigations where every small detail matters, stay with me, because this case doesn't just raise questions about what happened, it forces us to ask whether someone saw something and never spoke up. This is the story of Maryanne Wesolowski, a young woman who disappeared in Glens Falls, New York in August of 1971. No confirmed sightings after she left, no verified contact, no closure, just a cold case file that has aged for over half a century. In this episode, we're going step by step: the timeline, the last known movements, the search, the theories, the overlooked angles, and the uncomfortable possibilities. I'm not going to rush you through this. We're going to walk it slowly, the same way she walked that morning, and examine every turn in the road. To understand this case, you have to understand the time period. This was 1971 America. No cell phones, no GPS tracking, no doorbell cameras, no digital trails. When someone left home, they often disappeared from record until they returned. Plans were spoken, not texted. Locations were agreed, not shared live. Glens Falls was considered a quiet city, not the kind of place where people simply vanish in daylight. Families knew their neighbors, teenagers walked to meet friends, swimming spots were social hubs in summer. It was normal, routine, safe, at least that's what everyone believed. You're watching Hidden Chronicles, more than just a channel, it's a community of truth seekers. Subscribe to stay informed, share to help others discover the truth, and join the discussion in the comments. Together, we uncover what's hidden. The summer of 1971 was hot, the kind of heavy, humid heat that settles over upstate New York in August and doesn't let go. Kids were out of school, the Hudson River was calling, and for a 13-year-old girl with light brown hair and blue eyes, summer meant one thing: freedom. Maryanne Wesolowski was born on June 24, 1958. She was the oldest child in her family, a shy and somewhat withdrawn girl, according to those who knew her. She wasn't the loudest kid in the room, she didn't demand attention, but she was observant, she was thoughtful, and underneath that quiet exterior, there was a girl who felt things deeply, perhaps too deeply for her age. She stood about 4 feet 5 inches tall and weighed roughly 85 to 90 pounds. She had light brown hair and those striking blue eyes. She had a scar on her abdomen and a distinctive butterfly-shaped scar on her upper chest, physical marks that would later become critical identifiers in the search for her. Her teeth were slightly crooked, another detail investigators would later rely upon when searching databases for unidentified remains. She lived with her family at 44 Hudson Avenue in Glens Falls, a residential street in a working-class neighborhood, just a short walk from the Hudson River and Haviland's Cove, the popular beach spot where local kids spent their summer days swimming and hanging out. By all accounts, life at home for Maryanne was not entirely easy. Her younger brother Paul, who was 7 years old when she disappeared, would later describe the household as one with a lot of problems. He said his sister was generally shy but seemed happy in the period before her disappearance. He also, and this is important, believed for years that she had simply run away and was still alive somewhere. That belief, held by her own brother, would shape how people thought about this case for decades. But there was something else,
something that investigators and amateur sleuths would point to again and again over the years as a clue that the full story of this disappearance had never been told. Maryanne had left a note. Not just one note, two. The first note was discovered after her disappearance, addressed to her mother. It read simply, "I'm leaving. I might miss you." The second note, written to her sister months before she vanished, was never mailed. Her family found it tucked away among her belongings after she was gone. In that letter, Maryanne wrote something that stopped everyone cold. She wrote that she hated Glens Falls. She wrote that she couldn't wait for summer to start. What did she mean? Was she counting down to freedom? Was she planning something? Or was she just a restless 13-year-old girl dreaming of a bigger life? These are questions that have never been answered.
Now we come to the day itself. August 18, 1971, a Wednesday. The morning started normally enough. Maryanne, her 7-year-old brother Paul, and one of her girlfriends had gone to Haviland's Cove Beach, the sandy stretch along the Hudson River where local kids went to swim and escape the heat. It was a familiar place, a comfortable place, a place Maryanne had been many times before. But something happened at the beach that morning that would set the rest of the day and possibly the rest of Maryanne's life into motion. At the beach, the children saw something they weren't supposed to see. They saw their mother's boyfriend, a man named Chuck Phillips, with another woman. He was at the beach with someone who was not their mother. This detail, which would only come to light years later, is one of the most significant and overlooked pieces of this entire case. Think about it for a moment. A 13-year-old girl sees her mother's boyfriend cheating. She and her little brother go home and tell their mother what they saw. And then their mother sends Maryanne back to the beach, back to confront Chuck Phillips, back to tell him to come home. Let that sink in. A 13-year-old girl sent back alone to deliver an uncomfortable message to an adult man who had just been caught cheating. A man who now knew the children had seen him and that they had gone home and told their mother. Maryanne walked with her brother Paul to the corner of Hudson Avenue and Spring Street. It was around 3 in the afternoon. At that corner, Paul asked if he could come with her. Maryanne told him no. She told him to stay home. She said she'd be back soon. Those were the last words anyone who loved her ever heard her say. She turned and walked toward Haviland's Cove. She was wearing her white t-shirt, her red and white shorts, her black leather belt. She was 4 feet 5 inches, 85 pounds, 13 years old. And she never came back. According to one account, Maryanne was last seen at Haviland's Cove at approximately 3 p.m., walking toward a nearby sandwich shop to get something to eat. She never made it to the shop. She never delivered her mother's message. She never returned home. No one who saw her that afternoon ever came forward with information about where she went or who she was with. When she didn't return home that evening, her family began to worry. By the following day, it was clear something was seriously wrong. The police were called. A search began. And the case of Maryanne Wesolowski, a case that would stretch across more than 50 decades, was officially opened.
The initial investigation into Maryanne's disappearance was handled by the Glens Falls Police Department, and right from the beginning there were problems. In 1971, America did not have the systems it has today for handling missing children. There was no National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. That organization wouldn't be founded until 1984. There was no national database for missing persons. There was no internet, no social media, no rapid information sharing between law enforcement agencies. When a child went missing in a small town in upstate New York in 1971, the search was largely local, and local meant limited. The Glens Falls Police Department canvassed the area around Haviland's Cove and Hudson Avenue. They spoke to family members and friends. They searched the riverbank. They looked for any sign of what might have happened to a 13-year-old girl on a summer afternoon. They found nothing. No witnesses came forward with useful information. No physical evidence was discovered. No body was found in or around the Hudson River. No clothing, no personal items, nothing. And here is where we encounter one of the most frustrating aspects of this entire case, the note. When investigators learned that Maryanne had left a note saying, "I'm leaving, I might miss you," many of them, and members of the public, began to lean toward the theory that she had simply run away from home, that she was an unhappy teenager in a troubled household, and she had chosen to leave, voluntarily. This theory, while not unreasonable on its surface, had serious problems. Maryanne was 13 years old. She weighed less than 90 pounds. She had no money, no transportation, no known plans for running away. She had just been to the beach that morning. She was on a specific errand, sent by her mother to retrieve Chuck Phillips, and she had told her brother she would be back soon. These are not the actions of someone making a dramatic exit from their life. But in 1971, a troubled kid who left a note saying she was leaving, many people simply assumed she had run away. And that assumption, more than almost anything else, may have damaged the early investigation beyond repair. The case went cold relatively quickly. There were no major breaks, no credible sightings, no confessions, no arrests. The file sat in the Glens Falls Police Department, gathering dust as months turned into years and years turned into decades.
For most cold cases, the hardest part is that there is no suspect at all. No name, no face, no direction to look. In the case of Maryanne Wesolowski, investigators have identified a person of interest. And when you learn his history, the blood runs cold. His name is Kenneth Arnold Yarder, Jr. In 1971, Kenneth Yarder lived in Glens Falls. He was an adult male in the area at the time of Maryanne's disappearance. And here is the critical detail. He worked at a restaurant near the location where Maryanne was last seen. He was there. He was local, and he had access to the area where a 13-year-old girl was walking alone on an August afternoon. But it gets much worse. In 1974, just 3 years after Maryanne vanished, Kenneth Yarder was charged with the abduction and murder of a 16-year-old girl named Susan Camel Zonta in Argyle, New York. A teenage girl, abducted, murdered, 3 years after Maryanne disappeared and just a short distance away. The charges in Susan Zonta's case were dismissed in 1977 after crucial evidence was thrown out of court. Yarder walked free, but the story did not end there, not even close. After 1977, Kenneth Yarder went on to be convicted of 3 separate rapes, one in New Jersey and one in Florida. A documented serial sexual predator operating across multiple states. Then, in 1995, he was charged with Susan Zonta's murder again. Prosecutors had found a way to bring the case back. This time, Yarder confessed. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in 1996 and was sentenced to life in prison. He is currently serving that life sentence, and according to the timeline of his original sentence structure, he was eligible for parole consideration in 2026. Now, to be absolutely clear, Kenneth Yarder has never been officially charged in connection with the disappearance of Maryanne Wesolowski. He has not been named as a suspect by law enforcement. He has been described as a person of interest, which is a legally significant distinction. There is no confirmed physical evidence linking him to her case. But consider the facts.
a man who lived in Glens Falls in 1971, who worked near where Maryanne was last seen, who 3 years later abducted and murdered a teenage girl in the same region, who was convicted of multiple rapes, who eventually confessed to a murder he had evaded prosecution for twice. The question that haunts this case is simple and devastating. Did he do it before Susan Zonta? Was Maryanne Wesolowski his first victim? Investigators have looked at this connection. The case file has been reviewed with Yarder in mind, but without physical evidence, without a confession, without witnesses, the connection cannot be proven. And so it remains, a terrifying shadow hanging over an already dark case.
Let's go back to those notes, because I think they deserve more attention than they have received. Maryanne Wesolowski left 2 written pieces behind. The first was the note to her mother, "I'm leaving, I might miss you." The second was an unmailed letter to her sister found after the disappearance, in which she said she hated Glens Falls and couldn't wait for summer. For decades, these notes were treated as evidence of a runaway, but let's look at them more carefully. The note to her mother says, "I'm leaving." It doesn't say where she's going. It doesn't say goodbye forever. It doesn't include any plans, any names, any destinations. And that phrase, "I might miss you," is strange for a runaway note. Not "I'll miss you," not even "I won't miss you." "I might miss you." There's ambiguity there, uncertainty. It reads less like a goodbye and more like the words of a girl who was deeply conflicted about something. And the letter to her sister, the one she never mailed, talks about hating Glens Falls. Teenagers hate their hometowns all the time. They dream of leaving. They feel trapped. That is the universal language of adolescence. It doesn't mean she had a plan. It doesn't mean she was ready to disappear. What if those notes meant something different than we've assumed? What if "I'm leaving" referred to a specific situation, maybe the tension at home surrounding Chuck Phillips? What if she was expressing frustration, not announcing a departure? What if the note was written days or weeks before she vanished, and its connection to her disappearance is simply coincidental? Or, and this is the darkest possibility, what if Maryanne was planning to leave and someone found out? What if someone didn't want her to go? What if there was a person in her life or in her path that afternoon who had reason to stop her? These are questions investigators have wrestled with, and they are questions that remain, frustratingly, without definitive answers. What we do know is this: a girl who wanted to leave her hometown, who was sent on an errand by her mother to confront a man who had reason to fear what the children had seen, ended up disappearing from that very location. Whether that is coincidence or causation is something only the truth can reveal. The years after 1971 were years of silence for the Wesolowski family. No answers came, no body was recovered, no arrest was made, and the world, as the world always does, moved on. But the family didn't. How could they? Maryanne's mother spent years not knowing whether her daughter was alive or dead, whether she had run away and was somewhere living a life they knew nothing about, or whether something terrible had been done to her. That uncertainty, that not knowing, is often described by families of missing persons as the most unbearable part. Grief, as devastating as it is, has an end point. You mourn, you remember, you try to heal. But not knowing is a wound that never closes. Her brother Paul, the 7-year-old who stood at the corner of Hudson Avenue and Spring Street and watched his sister walk away for the last time, grew up carrying that image. He held on to the belief for many years that she had run away and was still alive. That belief, perhaps protective, perhaps necessary for his own survival, kept him from fully accepting that something violent may have happened to her.
The case file stayed open at the Glens Falls Police Department, but open does not mean active. Without new leads, without new evidence, there was little investigators could do. Cold cases are called cold for a reason. The trail had gone cold before it barely had a chance to get warm. In the 1980s, the creation of national databases for missing persons began to change how old cases were handled. Maryanne's information was entered, her description was cataloged, the distinctive butterfly-shaped scar on her chest, her crooked teeth, her light brown hair and blue eyes. If she had died and her remains were found somewhere, there was now a system, however imperfect, to identify her. No match was found. In the 1990s, the case received renewed attention. Local newspaper The Post-Star ran stories on the disappearance in 1993, 1995, and 1998, each time hoping that fresh publicity might shake loose a memory, inspire a witness to come forward, or cause someone with knowledge of what happened to finally speak. And each time, the response was the same: silence. Then came Kenneth Yarter's 1996 guilty plea in the Susan Zanta murder. Suddenly, the name of a convicted killer who had lived in Glens Falls in 1971 was back in circulation. The connection to Maryanne's case was not lost on investigators or on those following cold cases in the region. The Glens Falls Police Department took note, but still, no hard evidence, no confession, no link that could be proved in a court of law.
The early 2000s brought new tools to old cases. DNA technology had revolutionized forensic science. Digital databases had improved. The Internet had created communities of amateur investigators, people who spent their own time poring over cold case files, cross-referencing information, looking for connections that official investigators might have missed. In 2012, 41 years after Maryanne vanished, the Glens Falls Police Department made a significant move. They asked the New York State Police Cold Case Squad to formally review Maryanne's file. This was not just a symbolic gesture. The Cold Case Squad brought fresh eyes, modern forensic capabilities, and access to databases and resources that the original investigators had never had. Around the same time, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children produced an age progression photograph of Maryanne, showing what she might look like at age 53 if she was still alive. This image was distributed widely, appearing in news coverage and online databases. It was an eerie and moving image, the face of a 13-year-old girl, aged by technology into a middle-aged woman, still unnamed, still unknown, still missing. The renewed attention generated tips. One tip in particular seemed significant, a report that a woman in a group home in another state resembled the age-progressed image of Maryanne. Investigators followed up, they traveled, they investigated, and after careful examination, they determined that the woman was not Maryanne Wesolowski. Another dead end. Another door that opened briefly and then closed. Around this same time, a new detail emerged from community sources, the detail about Chuck Phillips, the mother's boyfriend, and what the children had seen at the beach that morning. This information, apparently known within the community for years, had either never been fully investigated or had been investigated without result. But it reframed the entire case for many observers. The sequence of events on August 18, 1971 was not simply girl walks to beach and disappears. It was girl witnesses something she shouldn't. Girl goes home. Girl is sent back to confront the person she saw. Girl disappears. Whether that sequence is relevant to what happened to her, whether Chuck Phillips or Kenneth Yarter or some unknown third party was responsible, remains unproven. Let's step back and look at everything we know. Not theories, not speculation, just the facts as they have been established and reported. Fact: Maryanne Wesolowski was 13 years old when she disappeared on August 18, 1971. Fact:
She left her home at 44 Hudson Avenue in Glens Falls, New York, on foot. Fact: her destination was Haviland's Cove Beach on the Hudson River. Fact: she had been at that beach earlier that morning with her brother and a friend. Fact: while at the beach that morning, the children saw their mother's boyfriend, Chuck Phillips, with another woman. Fact: they went home and told their mother. Fact: their mother sent Maryanne back to the beach to deliver a message to Chuck Phillips. Fact: at the corner of Hudson Avenue and Spring Street, Maryanne told her brother Paul to stay home, that she would be back soon. Fact: she was last seen at approximately 3 p.m. in the Haviland's Cove area. Fact: one account places her walking toward a nearby sandwich shop. Fact: she never arrived at the shop, never delivered her mother's message, and never returned home. Fact: a note was found addressed to her mother reading, "I'm leaving, I might miss you." Fact: an unmailed letter to her sister was found expressing hatred for Glens Falls and eagerness for summer. Fact: Kenneth Yarder lived in Glens Falls in 1971, worked near the area of her disappearance, and 3 years later abducted and murdered a teenage girl in the same region. Fact: no body has ever been found, no cause of death has ever been determined, no arrest has ever been made in connection with her disappearance. Fact: as of 2026, this case remains officially open and unsolved. Now, what do these facts suggest? There are 3 primary theories that investigators and researchers have considered over the years. Theory 1. She ran away. The notes support this. The family problems support this. Her brother believed this for years. Under this theory, Maryanne reached Haviland's Cove, or perhaps never went to the beach at all, and instead used the opportunity to leave town. She may have met someone, a friend, an older acquaintance, someone she had arranged to meet, and left Glens Falls behind. Under this theory, she may still be alive today, living under a different name in a different place, having chosen to leave her old life completely behind. Theory 2. She was killed by a known person. Under this theory, something happened at or near Haviland's Cove that afternoon involving someone Maryanne knew, possibly Chuck Phillips, who had reason to be concerned about what she might tell people, or possibly someone else connected to her personal life. The confrontation that her mother had set up may have gone terribly wrong. Under this theory, her body was disposed of, likely in or near the Hudson River, which would explain why no remains were ever found. Theory 3. She was taken by a predator. Under this theory, Kenneth Yarder, or an unknown individual, encountered Maryanne on her walk to Haviland's Cove and abducted her. She was a small girl, 85 pounds, walking alone. She would have been vulnerable. If Yarder was responsible, he had the means, the proximity, and, as his later crimes would demonstrate, the capacity for such violence. None of these theories has been proven. All of them remain possible.
In all of this, the theories, the suspects, the cold cases and cold trails, it is easy to lose sight of the human cost, the people who loved Maryanne Wesolowski, the people who never stopped looking, the people who lived with the absence of answers for over 50 years. Her brother Paul was 7 years old when he watched her walk away at the corner of Hudson Avenue and Spring Street. That image, his big sister in her white t-shirt and red shorts telling him to stay home, that she'd be back soon, is one of the last real memories he has of her. He grew up. He aged. She didn't. He believed for many years that she was alive somewhere, that she had chosen to leave. In a way, that belief may have been kinder than the alternative, but as the years stretched on, as the decades passed, as the searches turned up nothing and no one matching her description ever emerged, the weight of not knowing must have pressed down harder and harder.
Her mother waited, as mothers do, because what else is there to do? You raise a child for 13 years. You know their face, their laugh, their scars, the butterfly-shaped scar on her chest, the one on her abdomen. You know their crooked teeth and their blue eyes. And then one day they walk out the door and the world takes them, and you spend the rest of your life not knowing what happened, not knowing if they're cold, not knowing if they're at peace, not knowing anything at all. There are names on every cold case file, but behind every name is a family like this, people who deserved answers, people who are still waiting. In 2026, the tools available to investigators are unrecognizable compared to what existed in 1971, and some of those tools are being used on cases just like Maryanne's. Forensic genealogy, the technology that helped crack the Golden State Killer case in 2018, has transformed the field of cold case investigation. By comparing DNA from crime scenes or unidentified remains against publicly available genealogy databases, investigators can sometimes identify suspects or victims who were previously unknown. The technique has solved dozens of cases that were decades old. If any DNA evidence was collected in Maryanne's case, from the note she wrote, from items she left behind, from any physical evidence at the scene, it could potentially be analyzed using these modern methods. The Charlie Project database has her DNA listed as available, which suggests that biological material has been preserved and cataloged for potential future comparison. Age progression technology continues to improve. The most recent age-progressed image of Maryanne shows what she might look like at age 62 if she is still alive. It is a powerful and haunting image. The face of a woman who would now be in her mid-60s, who might be living an ordinary life somewhere, completely unknown, or who might have died decades ago in circumstances no one has yet connected to her name. The FBI maintains her case on their VCAP, Violent Criminal Apprehension Program database, the National Repository for Violent Crimes, Missing Persons, and Unidentified Remains. This means that if any physical evidence surfaces anywhere in the country that could be connected to her case, there is a system designed to catch it. The Glens Falls Police Department continues to list her case as open. Tips can still be submitted. Evidence can still be submitted. Somebody, somewhere, knows something. Kenneth Yarder, the convicted murderer who lived in Glens Falls in 1971 and worked near the site of Maryanne's disappearance, became eligible for parole consideration in 2026. He has confessed to one murder. He has been convicted of multiple rapes. Whether he has ever spoken about Maryanne Wesolowski is not publicly known.
Let me be honest with you about something. This story does not have a resolution. There is no moment where the mystery is solved and the credits roll. There's no justice. There is no closure. Not yet. What we have are fragments. A note that may mean everything or nothing. A morning at the beach that set off a chain of events nobody fully understands. A girl who walked to a corner, told her brother she'd be back soon, and stepped out of history. A convicted killer who lived nearby, worked nearby, and has a history that makes the connection impossible to ignore. An investigation that did its best with the tools of its time. A family that waited and suffered and deserved better. What we don't know is so much larger than what we do know. We don't know who, if anyone, was responsible for her disappearance. We don't know whether she is alive or dead. We don't know what was said or done in those final moments before she vanished. We don't know whether the note was written in the context of running away or in the context of something else entirely. We don't know whether Chuck Phillips was ever seriously investigated. We don't know what Kenneth Yarder did or didn't do on August 18, 1971. We don't know where Maryanne is. That is the most fundamental and devastating fact in this entire case. A 13-year-old girl walked down a street in Glens Falls, New York on a summer afternoon, and nobody knows where she went.
after 53 years, after searches and tip lines and cold case reviews and age progression photographs and FBI databases and everything else, nobody knows where she is.
Cold cases are called cold, but there is nothing cold about them. Not really. Not to the families. Not to those who have followed these cases for years and decades. Not to those of us who believe that every victim deserves to be found. Every family deserves an answer. Every unsolved case represents not just a failure of a system, but a human being who has been forgotten. Maryanne Wesolowski has not been forgotten. Not by the investigators who have revisited her file. Not by the online communities who have kept her name alive. Not by those who have shared her age-progressed photograph and asked in thousands of posts and threads and articles over the years, "Do you know this person? Have you seen her? Do you know what happened?" She was born on June 24, 1958. She was a shy girl who loved summer. She had a butterfly-shaped scar on her chest and blue eyes and light brown hair and crooked teeth. She hated Glens Falls, or at least she said she did, the way so many teenagers hate the small towns they grew up in. She had a little brother who adored her. She had a mother who waited for her. She walked to a corner on a hot August afternoon. She told her brother she would be back soon. She is still waiting to come home. If you have any information about the disappearance of Maryanne Wesolowski, please contact the Glens Falls Police Department at 518-613-8840. You can remain anonymous. All tips are taken seriously. It has been over 53 years, but cases like this are never truly closed, not until the truth comes out, not until Maryanne comes home. Her FBI case is still active. Her NamUs profile is still maintained. Her name is still in the databases, because somebody out there knows something. Somebody has been carrying this secret, or pieces of it, for over half a century. And if that person is watching this right now, or if someone who knows that person is watching this right now, it is not too late to do the right thing. It is never too late to do the right thing. Maryanne Wesolowski, born June 24, 1958. Last seen August 18, 1971. Still missing, still remembered, still waiting.